All right, so before last Sunday, we were in our core belief statement time. And so I think what we'll begin with is we're going to begin by reading our core belief of marriage. You don't need to stand for this. It's on the next slide. This was last fall. We as Bateman Church began writing these together. As a church, began praying about these together and saying, this is what we're going to believe. This is the rock we're standing on. So it's not God's word, but it matters a lot for us. If you're going to become a member of Bateman, if you're going to partner with this church, we don't want you to be in disagreement with our core beliefs. This is what we believe about marriage, and then everything springs from this. So you guys, help me read this out loud together. Read this with me. We believe that marriage is the uniting of one man and one woman in covenant commitment for a lifetime. Last time we talked on marriage, we were talking more about that word commitment, which we'll have a review on that in a second. But what is underlined today? For a what? Lifetime. Lifetime. We're going to talk about, it's not just the wedding day. It's not just the vows. It's not just what marriage is, but it's what it is over time. But let's review from last week. I've got 2 questions up here just to help you think about what we talked about last time on marriage. And this one's really simple. I hope you get it right, and please answer out loud. Is the purpose of marriage to make you happy? Is that why it exists? No. We talked about last time, we learned from Ephesians 5, marriage exists to image, to model for the world the relationship between Christ and the church, and there can be years and moments of bliss, but it is about who we will be together, who we will be together. And I have a question. Did Jesus suffer for his bride? Absolutely. He died for his bride. So the purpose of marriage is not just to make you happy, not just to make you not feel lonely. It's something big. It's something from God. And that gives you a good hint at the next question to review from last time. Is marriage made? Is it worked? And is it purposed by God? Yes. Marriage is not about you. It's about what God wants to do and show through you. And that's where we begin. We need to talk about this idea of covenant. It's not just an agreement. It's not a contract. I'll get this out of the marriage. You'll get that out of the marriage. And if we stop getting this or that, then let's just call it off. That's what the world does with marriage. But so many Christians do the same thing because we've forgotten what it is. Our divorce rates end up being the same. But it's one thing to say, do you know what marriage is? Today, I want us to think more in line of this. We're talking about maintenance. Who here has ever bought a car? Who here has ever bought a car? Who here has bought a car in the last year? Who here has bought a car in the last year? Okay, yeah, Linda. I'll pick on you. I'll come over here. So Linda, whenever you bought your car, was it an enjoyable experience? No. What made it unenjoyable?
I hate the back and forth pricing, trying to come to an agreement.
Going back and forth. Am I going to find the financing? Are they going to give me the price they want? Is it going to work out that way? So your buying your car was unenjoyable. So that means in 5 years it won't be running anymore, right?
No, it doesn't mean that.
But it wasn't enjoyable. You began and it was a frustrating start. So it won't run in 5 years, right?
I make sure it does.
But I mean, were like your keys broken, or whenever you signed, did your pencil break? No, but so it started rough, but in 5 years you think it'll still be running.
Yes.
Why?
Because we're going to maintain it.
She's going to maintain her car. Everybody give a hand for Linda. Yeah. See, whenever we buy a car, maybe it's a pleasant experience, maybe it's an unpleasant experience. It's pleasant at least if you get rid of your old clunker to get a new vehicle. But we understand and we know with the vehicle, you have to maintain it. What's the picture on the right side of the screen? What's the picture of that? That's the oil change. They didn't use an actual oil pan. They used Mama's Tupperware, it looks like. But I guess that's on Mama. We'll talk more about that as we talk about maintaining your marriage. Don't use Mama's Tupperware. But we recognize that a car over its life cycle, and in the beginning, there are certain things you have to do. Who remembers whenever you used to buy a new car, especially, they said, don't drive it too fast. We're straight out of the lot. It used to be the case. Not as much anymore. So you had to treat a car a certain way at the beginning. And then as it got to 50,000 miles, as the powertrain warranty began to go out, you began to think about, maybe the tires, maybe the battery. As you get up towards 100,000 miles, what are you going to start looking for? You guys know about cars. What are you going to start looking for at 100,000 miles? What are you going to make sure is still working? The belts, the hoses, your thermostat, hopefully not your water pump. And then by the time you get to 200,000 miles, you know all bets are off. All bets are off. But if you want your car to keep running, you don't just say, oh, I guess I'm half a quart low. I'm going to have to get a new one. No. You would go in for an oil change. You would maintain it. And we know that there's sequences and differences over the life of the vehicle. But here's the deal. So often in our marriages, just like with Linda over here, is your car going to be running in 5 years? We say, is our marriage going to be running in 5 years? And we base it off of that very beginning. Did I like him enough whenever we got married? How did we communicate on our wedding day? And we keep on going back to that beginning. And it's as foolish as someone saying, my car will be running in 5 years. My car will be running in 10 years because I got great financing. Because my car keys were so shiny and they jingled so well. We'd say, you're crazy. Are you maintaining your vehicle? But with our marriage so often, we just point to the beginning and that's all we know how to do. We don't think about how to maintain it for a lifetime. So I want us to go to this overview. Let me give you a roadmap of where we're going. There's 5 parts as we talk about this maintaining for a lifetime. The last 2 are joined together. We're going to talk about discernment. This is the very beginning. This is like whenever you're a teenager, whenever you're in your 20s. Then there's the courtship phase, which that word, whatever it means for you, I mean that's you've got someone and you're finding out if you're moving towards marriage. Then there's the beginning of marriage. That's the honeymoon phase. And then there's disruption. And if your marriage is going to make it, renewal. But so often we focus on just one part over the life of our marriage. You're not going to get to 50 years just by saying I have shiny car keys. You have to maintain it over the course of a lifetime. So let's go to our first text today. This next slide, Matthew 19, talking about discernment. Like I said, this is before you're even married. This follows up on that teaching that we had from Mark 10 before, where Jesus says what marriage is to God. And he said it's a pretty big deal. Then he continues the teaching. Matthew 19, starting in verse 11. Jesus tells his disciples this: not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have been made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of, you guys tell me, heaven. Made eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this, receive it. Before you were married, if you're a teenager, if you're in your 20s, if you aren't with someone dating right now, if you're not sure, we usually tell them, well, make sure you find the right person to marry. There's one question before that we need to back up, and Jesus points at it right here. He's talking about this idea of a eunuch. He's not saying, hey, Christian, go commit this surgery. He's not saying that. He's saying there are people whose lives are so devoted to the purposes of God, which, just to review, what is God's purpose for your life? For you to become more and more and more like who? Jesus. Jesus is saying there are people in God's church, in God's kingdom, that they are so devoted to his big mission for their life that God has granted them the grace and the purpose to not pursue marriage. And here's how we know that's true. Was Jesus married? No. He marries the church, but there's not a woman that says, he is my husband who will defend me, who will lead me. Jesus is totally devoted to the plans of God. I have known people that they have said, God's plan for my life is not to pursue marriage. And I get to watch them do beautiful, amazing things. But the church, we can get in trouble. We can sort of commit a type of heresy. We tell every young person, God's plan for your life is to be married. Or we may just unintentionally give off the vibe that the only people God can use are married people. That's not true. Jesus himself was not married, and he changed your life. So while you're in that early stage of your life, don't begin by asking, who will I marry? I hope I find the right man or right woman. You need to seriously ask God, is God's purpose for my life to be married? Back up one more step. But most of us will say, I am moving that direction. It's a good thing. God designed marriage. We talked about that last week. It is beautiful. And then we go into what I call this phase of courtship. This next slide. And I'll sort of summarize the book of Ruth. I'll ask you a Bible trivia question. I don't know how many greats grandmother is Ruth? What Israelite king? Maybe Linda knows. Oh, wow, that's a double whammy. I heard 2 right answers. Technically, she's I don't know how many greats grandmother of Jesus, but King David. So Ruth's relationship, God's purpose for her life definitely was to have a family, definitely to get married. But the story of the book of Ruth is that Ruth is the daughter-in-law of this woman, Naomi, and Ruth's husband dies. So legally and culturally, she's no longer connected to Naomi. But she says, I'm gonna follow you. I'm gonna be devoted to you. And Naomi cares for Ruth deeply. And so Ruth knows that God's purpose for her life is to find another husband. And she seeks Naomi's wisdom. She seeks God's wisdom. And if you asked her, you would say, Ruth, what helped you decide to go into that field? She would say, it was God. So she's working in a field, and she finds out she's working with a man named Boaz. Boaz is kind, and most importantly, Boaz honors the true God. Now, in our culture, in our day and age, normally your young person, if they're seeking a husband or wife, would say, ooh, I like this guy or gal. I'm marrying him no matter what. Too bad, so sad, mom and dad, grandma. I'm not seeking your wisdom. But instead, Ruth recognizes it is wise and good to talk to Naomi, who she knows honors God and cares for her. And listen to what Naomi says to Ruth. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. Go back and work with Boaz. Go back and cultivate the relationship. That's pretty backwards from our culture, and this is a challenge for you young people. If there are adults in your life who honor God and who care for you, talk to them about who you are dating, who you are seeking to marry. They have your best interests at heart. And what you really need to ask yourself, especially in Ruth, in Boaz's case, but in our day too, does he or she honor God? That's not usually the question that a teenager, that a 20-year-old is asking before they change their Facebook status to in a relationship. They're usually asking, do I think she's pretty enough? Do I think he's funny enough? Does he make enough money? Does he or she honor God? Because once again, it's sort of foolish. What I say God's big purpose for your life is, for you to become more and more and more like who? But we have so many young people. I had friends growing up that it was this way. They said, I know that it will help me fill that purpose. I know it will help me become like Jesus if I am seeking someone who honors God, someone who will worship God with me, someone who will strengthen my relationship. But that's for those other Christians. I can get by with this guy that hates God. Or I can get by with this girl that has no desire to honor God. And what it does, it actually kills the next part in the courtship phase and the discernment. Is this the guy? Is this the girl phase? Really where you should go to. Isn't it now Ruth and Boaz's relationship, was it based off of a bunch of Match.com, fun dates that they did together? What were they doing? They were working together. While you're in the dating phase, while you're in the discernment phase, you need to work in the things of the kingdom of God with this man or woman. And I don't know what that may necessarily look for in your life, young person, middle-aged person, whoever's in this phase. But for Allison and myself, it meant that we were serving on mission trips together. We went down to Mexico together. We went to construction projects together. We worked vacation Bible school together. Because here's the deal. You may think that person is really romantic, but it will serve your life much better if you can serve faithfully alongside them. But too often we say, I had a nice date with them. They made me laugh. And then you say, okay, it's time to come into the marriage relationship. Let's covenant together. And then later, after kids, a few years down the road, you say, well, maybe now we should figure out how to serve God together. You put that backwards. Does he or she honor God? And do we serve God together? Ruth and Boaz, they knew what it was like whenever they were out in the hot field. They knew what it was like whenever they were laboring together. They weren't surprised by it. It was at the beginning. But you say, this person honors God. We serve God together. And then you have that wonderful wedding day. Who here still remembers their wedding day? Who here still remembers it? I'll ask Barb. But where was your wedding day at? In Ireland. I bet you remember that. That's fantastic. We remember our wedding day. It's this beautiful time. It's also this stressful time. Allison and I, we got married twice, by the way. We can talk more about that later. But at the beginning of your marriage, we usually try to fill it with romantic moments. We try to get the love life going. You're moving in together, hopefully for just the first time. But we need to understand there are big, important God things for the beginning of your marriage. So it's here in Genesis 2. I'll actually read it from the text. Genesis 2. God's intention for marriage, especially at the beginning. So it's Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and not what? Ashamed. So we see there's two goals at the beginning of marriage. Not just to say we went on dates before we had kids, or not just to say we took a great honeymoon together, but do we encourage or know each other spiritually? And here's a gut check question for you. Some of us have never accomplished this goal in our marriage. We moved in together, we became roommates, and things got stale because we didn't say it's my job to know my spouse spiritually. And here's one good test. There's multiple books, and there are strategies for doing this, and it'll be different for each relationship. But let me ask you this, husband. Let me ask you this, wife. Do you know your spouse's biggest prayer need today? Or would you have to guess? Say, I think it's their job. I think it's their disease. I don't know, I've never asked them. If you don't know that basic spiritual connection, what does my spouse need prayer for? Don't blame God if you grow apart. That's you. Do you know your spouse's biggest spiritual need? So whenever you're in that beginning phase of the relationship, that for Alice and myself, that meant that we had a devotion. We were going through every week, praying for each other, encouraging each other. You can even memorize scripture together, whatever you need, but you need to be connecting spiritually. And then here's the tough one. Like we said before, hopefully this is the first time that you guys have moved in together, and now that means you've got a roommate. Do roommates fight? Yeah. He's going to fold the socks wrong. Whenever Alice and I got first married, I folded the socks wrong. Not subjectively like Allison's opinion, but I truly did fold the socks wrong. And she let me know about it in a very kind and a very gentle way. But you see the yucky stuff in each other's life. You learn that she never puts the dishes in the sink. You learn that he always forgets to pay the power bill. They're all these small things. They're not earth-shattering. But in the beginning of our marriage, we can go one of two ways with it. It says in verse 25, they were naked and were not what? Ashamed. In the beginning of our marriage, we can either begin to practice shame, making sure that he feels bad about folding the socks wrong, making sure that she feels bad about the way she lets her mom treat her, whatever. Or we can say, I see that stuff, and I want to love you. I want to encourage you. I want to build up trust and safety. But oftentimes, whenever the family, the spouses moved in together, they've had their wedding day, the honeymoon's over, they begin to notice all the things they don't like, and then begin to hold it over each other's head. She begins to nag him. He begins to cut her down. And they just become fighting roommates who don't pray for each other and aren't connected spiritually. But that's the day-to-day stuff. That is roommate stuff. You don't have to be married to have those problems. You can just have a roommate and bug each other. But then we get actual disruptions. This next slide. And here's what we mean by disruption. These are the things that you would never expect or wish upon your life. This is a loss of a job. This is a loss of a child. This is finding out that he cheated on you. This is finding out that you guys may be homeless. This is the big disruption in your life. And the text that we have up here is from Matthew. And it is the parable of the sower. And the guy spreads out the seed on the fertile ground, on the rocky ground. And we see that it is about the kingdom of God. So don't misunderstand. This passage is bigger than just marriage. But as we've heard before, marriage is an image of Christ and the what? Church. So we can see wisdom in this. This is Matthew 13. I'll turn there. Matthew 13. It says in verse 18, "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it," and continues on, "the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in the heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a little while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the world, immediately he falls away." And this is the one that we want to pay attention to for marriage. "As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the what? World. And the deceitfulness of what? Riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful." See, here's the real tragedy whenever disruption comes into your marriage. If you react to it wrong, if it begins to sour what God is doing in your marriage, the sad thing isn't that you and your spouse won't like each other anymore. The sad thing isn't that you will be unhappy. Because is marriage for your happiness? No. It's for God's big purpose. That last word is unfruitful. Your marriage is meant to bear fruit. It is meant to be something the world looks at and says, that's what Christ in the church looks like. But if disruptions in your marriage come up and they defeat you, your marriage, you may not get a divorce, but you won't produce fruit. You'll just have a roommate that you tolerate for years and years and years. So before we talk about how to bring the marriage back, before we talk about renewal, there is some emergency and some preparatory steps you need to have in maintaining your marriage. First off, whenever that disruption comes, whenever you lose the baby, whenever you lose the job, whenever you lose the house, whenever you find out about the affair, whatever, our tendency is to say, that person, and you may even blame God. God, that man that you said is my husband is the problem. You, he, she is the problem. That's not going to help the marriage. That's not what Jesus did with you. Instead, we say, what is the disruption of everyone say our marriage. Don't say, you're so lazy. You're the problem. You lost the job. No, our marriage is hurting because we lost a job. You're in this together. But too often, whenever there's a big disruption, and most tragically, we'll see this whenever there's a miscarriage, like I talked about 3 weeks ago. The husband and wife don't feel like they can come together, like they can talk on the same terms. And it begins to divide them to where they say, you did this, you did that. They may even blame each other. But your marriage will never be healed if your reaction is to say you or that man or that woman. But you have to react with, our marriage has been disrupted, and then name it. And you may actually find out that you guys aren't in agreement on what's disrupting it. That's the beginning part. I thought it was because of this. You thought it was because of that. But we are in this together. So that's in the moment. That's whenever the thorns begin to sprout up. And I love in this passage, it has two pieces of wisdom. We need to see what kind of disruptions can come in our life. It's not just negative. It says this, the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world. Those are those negative things. Those things you would not wish on anybody. The loss of the child, the loss of the job, the loss of the house. But he says more. Or the deceitfulness of what? Riches. There are probably just as many marriages that have been broken down by money. Broken down by having such a great job that you work there too much. Great kids that you love so much you never take time for each other. Than marriages that are hurt by the bad stuff. We are fallen humans trying to fulfill God's purpose to become more and more like Jesus. And the trying things, the trials, can hurt us, but also the blessings we can go sour over. So don't be shy to say what's hurting our marriage is your job is so great, and we're spending too much time there. Recognize it can come from both sides. But here's how you really set yourself up. It's one thing in the moment to recognize you have to say our marriage, but also shock absorbers. Do we have shock absorbers? Which you need to start this today if you haven't. If you're driving down the road, going 70 miles an hour on 812, which I don't think you're supposed to go to. Let's say 80. You're definitely not supposed to go 80 on 812 for all of it, not just Elroy. Going way too fast, and you come along, and there's a pothole in the road. What is going to keep your truck, what is going to keep your car from hitting that, getting launched in the air and swerving to the right or the left and crashing? What part of the vehicle? The shock absorbers. And as the pothole is coming, you don't say, oh no, I better go get shock absorbers. They are in the car from the beginning. But too often in our marriages, we say it's going along fine. We don't need to prepare for anything. We don't need to have a support network at all. And I'll talk about two ways that plays out. What is the purpose of your marriage? To reflect the image of Christ and the... So it is sort of foolish and it's sort of backwards to say, my marriage will reflect Christ and the church, but I'll never be there to worship. That is important. How will you learn what the image of Christ and the church is if you aren't here with God's people worshiping? And there's another point where that connects. See, we have people, if your marriage goes south, if you have a big disruption, who here has someone they know they would call right away? Who has someone? You can raise your hand if you do. Maybe a mom, maybe a sister. But what we don't often think about is, would that person help defend our marriage? Say, I will pray for you and I will walk with you and your marriage will get through this? Or they will say, I always told you he wasn't good. I always told you she was going to do you wrong. We may have friends that we think they're here to defend our marriage, but really they're here to help us fight our spouse. Those aren't friends that are helping you be shock absorbers. Where you find people that will build up your marriage is in the body of Christ, because we have an interest in your marriage being successful, because your marriage reflects Christ and who? The church. You're telling a truth about us as we tell a truth about Jesus. So it is dangerous and it is sort of foolhardy if someone says, but my marriage is going great now. I don't need those relationships that are praying for us. I don't need to be worshiping God with his people. My family can do church all by herself. Yeah, your road is smooth. What about whenever there's a pothole? Do you have the shock absorbers? But that's in the moment. That's as the weeds sprout up. Let's go to this next slide. This is the one you want. If you've been married for 20 years, 30 years, this is the one you want. Okay, preacher. All right, I am not in the discernment phase. I'm not in the courtship phase. The beginning was a long time ago. We had the disruption. Okay, maybe I need to recognize it's an our thing, not a he or a she thing. What about renewal? This is where we need to spend most of our time. So renewal, this is Ephesians 4:32, and it's right before Paul begins to talk about Christ in the church. And we'll often skip over this passage and read it and say that it has 3 happy words in it. I love happy words, and then we'll continue on. But I want us to slow down today and focus on these 3 things that Paul commands. Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus, and he says this in verse 32, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave who? You. It's all connected to what Jesus did for you. And I said, let's hone in on these 3 words. These are big words. They don't all mean the same thing, and they don't just mean be happy with your spouse. The first word, kind. Who here has been to a fancy restaurant, one so fancy that they had somebody like a maitre d' or a hostess at the front that said, oh, may I be at your service? Been into a place like that. So we understand that we expect good service from people that we're paying money to. It's part of that relationship. But in our marriage, we understand there needs to be service. And that's what this word kind means. It's not an emotional thing. The actual Greek there means that you're talking about you will be useful to that person. You will make their day better. If you've been around me for a little while, you may hear me on a phone call or while we're in a meeting or I'm talking to you. What can I do to make your day better? But there's a challenge to that in a marriage. Is it easy to tell if the host, if the maitre d' is serving you well? Yes. Well, first off, there's nothing spilled in your lap. Second of all, they get to you to your table on time. But in marriage, we have a problem. And this is from my father, Tim McFarland. He calls it the 50-50 rule. Whenever you get married, you want to do, most of us think, I'll do half of the work and she'll do half the work. Or I'll take care of half of the stuff, half of it is on me, half of it is on her. Not meaning like in bills. I hope you're not separating all the bank account stuff and fighting over rent. But just in terms of the task of life. And if it gets skewed, unless there's special circumstances. Like whenever Allison was in school, I knew that I was going to have to do more work around the house just because she was studying all the time. But if that goes on for years and years and years, we begin to say that's a problem. But here's where we get messed up. If we want it to be 50-50, so if I wash the dishes, she mows the lawn, or if she takes the kid to daycare, I pick him up, whatever. You're talking about what you observe. You have your checklist. I have one question. Don't get it wrong. Whose eyeballs are in your head? Yours or your spouse's? Your own eyeballs are in your head. So on your list of things, you will see 100% of what you do. I was there whenever I did the dishes. I was there whenever I took Jack to daycare. I was there whenever I mowed the lawn. Are you there to observe everything your spouse does? No. And unless they walk around the house saying, honey, I must declare, today I picked up the kid from daycare. I must declare, today I scrubbed the baseboards. I must declare, today I called your mom, who you never call. You won't know. And if they did do that, it wouldn't really help. So what we need to be mindful of is if we're playing this game where we're trying to check off a list of where am I doing more than her, you will always lose. You will always fight because you cannot always see. So what my father says is that it needs to be more like 75-25. You must try to feel like you are out serving your spouse because that is the only way that you will have any sort of parity. But the Greek is so much simpler. At the end of the day, would your spouse say, they have served me? Not have you thought you served them, but would they say that? The next word is tender-hearted. Everybody put your hand on your belly. It's not quite noon yet, so I hope you're not hungry. Put your hand on your belly. The word is tender-hearted. We think of that as the center of emotion. The word is for good guts. Good guts. And here's where this helps us out. We may have times in our life where we're okay with being a little upset with somebody. Not that any of you have ever done this, but you may say, I sort of enjoy that he or she is in the doghouse. I sort of enjoy holding this over them, making them feel that way. And what's weird is humans, we're okay with that emotionally. If we say tender-hearted, we think it's normal for people to feel wrongly about each other for a little while. You know, two people fight in Sunday school. We expect them to be hot for a little while. But if someone says, I have been sick in my guts for a week. I felt a little bit sick on Friday. My whole family freaked out because I said something's wrong with my gut. What Paul is pointing out is that we say that it is okay and it is normal for us to have and harbor negative feeling towards our spouse. You need to react with as much care and concern towards how you feel towards them negatively as you would for a stomach bug. If you have a stomach bug, you're going to say, we got to deal with this now. Not, okay, let's go to H-E-B and just plan that our day is going to go normal. Because you're going to end up making a mess in the bottom of your car. But whenever it comes to our emotional connection to our spouse, how we feel about them, we say, I'll just sweep it under the rug. No, do you have good guts? And there are a lot of tools and strategies about how to communicate with your spouse on that. But you need to hear today that you need to be cautious and mindful. Are you harboring negative feelings towards them? Unforgiveness, hatred, anger, jealousy. Those matter, and those will poison your marriage. And then we come to this last word. forgiving. Usually whenever we think about forgiveness, we think about someone has done something wrong to me, and now that means they owe me. You may even use that phrase. I want to ask you that question, but in your life, you have probably heard someone say, but now you owe me one. Now you owe me one. And we think of that as what forgiveness is. There's a debt, and whenever they're ready to make it up, then we can be restored. I say something bad about the way she looks, or she says something negative about my mom. Once they find some way to restore that, then we can come back together. The word forgiving there, and you can look this up, as I was talking to Linda's class about, is the word for giving grace. Giving grace. So we see it's different from they owe me, but now you as the person who was wronged, you as the person who was hurt, you as the person who were forgot about, are trying to get something to them as quickly as possible. You are trying to get grace to them. And this is hard to hear. This is what connects to marriages that experience infidelity, deceit, dishonesty. And it's a challenge, and we'll say this is difficult. How can my job as the one who is hurt be to say that my job now is to show them grace, get it to them as quickly as possible? We don't mean grace where you've swept everything under the rug. You're going to deal with those guts. But you need to understand it's not that they owe you something, but you have something to give them. Grace and restoration. And how do we know this is the case? You may say this is hard, this is a challenge. Restoration sounds tricky. Well, remember what he says at the end of the verse. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. The model for your marriage is the model of what Jesus did for the church. So if you're in a time of restoration, you've had your disruption, you've depended on those shock absorbers, but now it's time to do the day-to-day maintenance of repairing the relationship. Ask yourself, are you kind? Would your spouse at the end of the day say that you have served me? Are you tender-hearted? Are you looking at your guts, saying, this is my gut feeling toward this person, and I'm not okay with it? And then would your spouse at the end of the day say, I know I've wronged you, but you have shown me grace? Too often the restoration never happens because at the end of the day, your husband, your wife would say, you're still holding that over me. I still feel it. I still sense it. And that's not what Jesus did for you. Let's go to this last slide. Make sure we sum everything up. Remember, we talked about maintaining your marriage for a lifetime. And just to make sure we re-emphasize, whenever it comes to a car, and I ask you, you said you just bought this car, would you tell, and I said, how do you know it will still be running in 5 years? Would you tell me, it'll be running in 5 years because I got great financing, because the car keys are so shiny, because the purchase experience was so fun? No, I would say you were crazy. Anybody who has ever maintained a car would say, well, what's your plan for changing the oil, rotating the tires, getting the battery tested? We know with a vehicle that it's going to change and take work over years, but with our marriages, do we plan that way? So if you're in the discernment phase, if you're still a teenager, if you're still a young person, don't begin by asking, is this the guy or gal for me? Ask, does God desire marriage for my life? And then as you are in courtship, you've got that person who's your boyfriend, your girlfriend, however it works for you. Don't just say, I want to have the most romantic experiences with this guy. Ask yourself, do they honor God? And understand it is foolish if you say, well, no, they don't really give a rip about God, but that's for those other Christians. That is dangerous for your life. But also ask, how can we serve together? If we plan on serving God together whenever we're in our 50s, we should start now. And then as you move on in your marriage, there's the point of the beginning of the marriage, which is to practice intimacy, to make sure that you are rooting out shame, not finding ways to shame each other, and also having the spiritual connection, which I'll challenge you again today. Husbands and wives, do you know what the biggest prayer concern of your spouse is? If you do not, find out today. Have that conversation. And then once there's the disruption, is it all his fault? Do you blame that person? No. You say it is our marriage. And along the way, make sure you have shock absorbers. And I'll issue this challenge. Man, we like to talk a lot about leading our marriage, leading our spouse, leading in finances, leading in the job. If you are not leading your spouse to church, you are not leading. All you're doing is depending on the smooth spot you're in now. And whenever the rough patch comes, it will be hard, and you'll say, well, that pothole ended anything. Have you prepared your marriage by making sure that your family, that your spouse, and you are worshiping together? And in the time of renewal, don't forget those 3 words. The kindness. Do they know you're at your service? The forgiveness. Would they say, you have given me grace? And then examining your own guts. Just like you would if you have the stomach bug. You don't treat it lightly. You deal with it. So today, as we move towards our time of invitation,